Buongiorno tutti quanti e benvenuti a Italian for Beginners. Il libro per questo corso si chiama Prego, An Invitation to Italian. You don't have to have the textbook to follow the course. However, I do highly recommend it if you're going to be following more than a couple of the videos. It is useful and I refer to it regularly. The exercises are in there, etc. So I encourage you to buy it if you are serious about following this course. Allora, in questo video vi parlo delle preposizioni articolate, un tema molto rilevante in italiano. Infatti, avrai già visto alcune di queste nelle lezioni precedenti. Sono tanto comuni che è quasi impossibile evitare di usarle. Questa lezione può essere un po' difficile per quelli che non hanno il libro. Ci sono molte forme da memorizzare, quindi vi servirà la tabella a pagina 110. In caso che non abbiate il libro, c'è una tabella simile su una slide in questo video, ma non è leggibile quanto quella nel libro. Cominciamo leggendo il paragrafo in cima a pagina 110. Ricordatevi che c'è anche la traduzione in fondo alla stessa pagina. Tutte le mattine vado al bar alle 8. Faccio colazione in fretta, prendo un caffè al banco e poi prendo l'autobus delle 8:15 per l'università. Frequento i corsi e all'1 mangio alla mensa universitaria con i miei amici. Dopo pranzo andiamo al bar a prendere un caffè e poi andiamo a studiare in biblioteca. Verso le 4 ho voglia di uno spuntino. Vado al bar e di solito prendo un tè caldo. Metto del miele nel tè e mangio un tramezzino. Verso le 5 prendo l'autobus e torno a casa. Now let's talk about these prepositions. First of all, I want to do some definitions. So, what is a preposition? A preposition is a word, usually a small one, that comes before a noun or pronoun and expresses a relationship between that noun and pronoun and some other part of the sentence. I'll give you some examples, so don't worry too much if that's abstract. The noun or pronoun that follows a preposition is called the object of that preposition. So I'll go with you is one example. In this case, with is the preposition and you is the object of the preposition. What are we doing after that? In this case, after is the preposition and that is the object of the preposition. I'm going to the supermarket. In this case, to is the preposition and the supermarket is the object of the preposition. What's in the basket? And in this case, in is the preposition and basket is the object of the preposition. The combination of the preposition and its object is called a prepositional phrase. So the prepositional phrases in the examples I just gave you would be with you, after that, to the supermarket, and in the basket. Let's talk a little bit about the differences between prepositions between languages, because prepositions are used differently in different languages, sometimes very differently. In fact, for any given Italian preposition, there's no single English translation and vice versa. So, for example, you could say studio ogni giorno in biblioteca. I study at the library every day. In this case, the preposition in is translated as at. On the other hand, if you say vado in ufficio alle 8:30, that translates to I go to the office at 8:30, which you can see that in this case is translated as to. So you need to really learn prepositions situationally. I'm not going to lie, prepositions are one of the hardest things to learn about a new language. Prepositions and articles are two things that many people can never fully learn about another language, but you have to try. So, there are also cases where a preposition is used in one language and just not used at all in another. So, for example, pagare, to pay for. In English, we say pay for, and in Italian, pagare includes the for in the verb. So you say pago il pranzo io, and that's the same thing as I'll pay for lunch. On the other hand, you could say something like ci vado senza di lei, and that translates to I'm going without her. This is a little funny because senza and di are actually both prepositions. We'll talk about this in a second. But you can see in either case that in Italian you have two prepositions where in English there's only one, so they are being used differently. So on that subject, let's talk about prepositions that require to be followed with di. So some prepositions need to be followed by di when their object is a pronoun. Remember that pronouns are not only personal pronouns, but can also be things like questo and quello, but only in certain cases. So, where those are used as pronouns. I'm sorry if that's confusing. I'm trying not to derail this. Like I said, it's kind of a challenging lesson. So some examples of how this works with prepositions that require di. Non possiamo cominciare senza di lei. You can see this senza di pattern again. And that means we can't start without her. Senza means without, and when it's followed by a pronoun, this di gets dropped in and doesn't mean anything in English. Also, another example would be entro dopo di te. I'll come in after you. Again, dopo would be after, and di doesn't get translated in English. It's required in Italian, but doesn't get translated in English. When the object of these prepositions is a noun or a name, anything that's not a pronoun, you don't use the di. So instead of non possiamo cominciare senza di lei, you could say non possiamo cominciare senza Luisa. We can't start without Luisa. And because Luisa is a proper name and not a pronoun, the di is not used. Again, entro dopo Francesca. I'll come in after Francesca. And same thing there. The di is not used because Francesca is a name and not a pronoun. Other than su, these prepositions don't get combined with articles like the other Italian prepositions, we're going to talk about that form preposizioni articolate. And actually, the book doesn't really talk about them in this section. But while we're talking about prepositions, I thought I would introduce most of them. So here are the simple prepositions. Preposizioni non articolate. And again, like I said, there's never ever going to be one single English translation for a given Italian pronoun, nor will there ever be a single Italian translation for a given English pronoun or preposition, sorry. So it's important to kind of learn them situation by situation, phrase by phrase. In this kind of a sentence, you use this one. In this kind of a sentence, you use that one. That kind of thing. So the simple prepositions in Italian include a, da, di, in, su, con, fra, and tra, which are the same thing, and which one you use just depends on what sounds good to you. And per. Some other prepositions, these are the ones that aren't covered in the book, are senza, without, dopo, contro, sotto, sopra, and verso. And you may recall that these are all the prepositions that are followed by di if their object is a pronoun. Again, so that's kind of a finer point, so don't get too hung up on it, but it's worth a mention that those take a di when the object is a pronoun. All right, so moving right along to preposizioni articolate. When some of those prepositions are followed by a definite article, they get combined with that article into a single word. So I've listed the Italian definite articles on the slide. There are 6 of them. The definite article in English is the, in case you don't remember. So yeah, prepositions get combined with the definite articles. In most cases, if the article begins with L, the L is doubled. So alla, sul, dallo, all have double L's. And then if the article is il, the I gets dropped and it just becomes al, dal, or sul. Finally, you can see that in the examples I just gave you, the article is kind of just tacked onto the preposition. So a, la becomes alla, sul becomes sul, and dallo becomes dallo. So some prepositions, well, 2 prepositions, di and in, actually change forms before the article gets attached. So di becomes de and in becomes ne. So here's the table that shows all of the preposizioni articolate. There's kind of a lot going on in this table. Like I said before, the one in the book is a little more legible just because of the constraints of having to fit this one on the slides and everything. So if you have the book, I would suggest referring to that one. So so let's just kind of read through these preposizioni articolate row by row, starting with a. So a plus il becomes al, a plus lo becomes allo, A plus L becomes al. A plus I becomes I. A plus Y becomes agli. A plus la becomes alla. Again, same thing with L feminine becomes al. And then A plus le becomes alle. I'm not going to give a full explanation for every one of these. I'm just going to read the words now. So for the preposition da, the preposizioni articolate become dal, dallo, dal, dai, dagli, dalla, dal, and dalle. D again changes its form to de before attaching the article, so that becomes del, dello, del, dei, degli, della, del, and delle. In also changes to ne, so those ones will be nel, nello, nel, nei, negli, nella, nel, and nelle. And finally, su has sul, sullo, sul, sui, sugli, sulla, sul, sulle. So I know that you might be a little overwhelmed with this table right now. Like I said, if you have the one in the book, it's a little bit less overwhelming. But yeah, there's a lot going on here. The good and the bad news is that these get used a lot in Italian. I mean, anytime you say, I have to go to the store or whatever, you're going to be using a preposizione articolata. So, and there's not really a word, by the way, for preposizione articolata in English. That's why I keep saying it in Italian. It's a feature of Italian grammar that doesn't exist in English. But yeah, so you'll have ample opportunities for practice on these, and even though the table looks pretty daunting, I promise you'll get used to them quickly. So here are some example sentences. Andiamo al bar. Let's go to the coffee shop. To the. A che ora vieni dall'aeroporto? What time are you coming from the airport? From the. I capelli della giovane ragazza sono bruni e ondulati. The young girl's hair is dark and wavy. So in this case, it's in Italian, you say the hair of the young girl is dark and wavy. Abitate negli Stati Uniti o abitate negli USA is, do you live in the United States? In the. And puoi leggere le parole sullo schermo means, can you read the words on the screen? On the. So those are just a few examples of how you'll see these used in sentences. Like I said, they're used all the time, so you'll get used to them quickly. Here's a little bit of information on usage and idioms. Like I said, since prepositions are used very differently, there are some situations where you want to just memorize how things work. So a lot of the time, Italian doesn't use a definite article if the statement that it's making is general and not specific, and only if the statement is qualified or made more specific is an article added. So a few examples of this would be sono in cucina. I'm in the kitchen. It could be any kitchen. I'm in some kitchen cooking. On the other hand, sono nella cucina di Andrea. I'm in Andrea's kitchen. So in that case, it specifies a specific kitchen that they're in, and that causes the article to be used. Similarly, andate in biblioteca a studiare. Are you going to the library to study? Again, we use the in English, and it's left out in Italian because this is just the library in general, not a specific library. But if you were going to say andate nella biblioteca universitaria a studiare, is are you going to the university library to study? Now it's specific, and that requires the article, so it becomes nella instead of in. Finally, andiamo in Italia quest'estate. We're going to Italy this summer. And again, that's general. It could be anywhere in Italy. If you were going to say something more specific, on the other hand, that would change to nel, like andiamo nell'Italia settentrionale. We're going to northern Italy. If the name of a country is plural, then the article is always used. So, like the last example, you would say vanno in Italia quest'estate. They're going to Italy this summer. In Italia. On the other hand, since gli USA is plural, we would say vanno negli USA quest'estate, or vanno negli Stati Uniti quest'estate. So here's some notes on the preposition a. When you use the preposition to refer to a city, it can mean either in the city or to the city. So you could say vado a Londra. I'm going to London. You could also say le cose sono tutte diverse a Londra. Things are totally different in London. That's another case where that preposition doesn't have the same translation to English in all cases. There are a couple other idiomatic expressions where a is used without the article, where we would use it in English. So, andiamo a teatro stasera. We're going to the theater tonight. In Italian, it's just a teatro. A couple other good ones. Di solito vado in ufficio a piedi. I usually go to the office on foot. A piedi. That's also the idiomatic way to translate that would be I usually walk to the office. There's a verb for to walk, camminare, but usually the more common way to say that is andare a piedi. Now, this last example doesn't have to do with a, but I wanted to contrast the two phrases, a piedi and in piedi. A piedi means on foot or walking. In piedi means on your feet, standing up. So, stiamo in piedi da 5 ore is we've been on our feet for 5 hours. So it's important to remember that if you're going somewhere, it's a piedi. If you're standing in one place, it's in piedi. Okay, so that covers everything. I hope you've been able to follow this. I know that there's been a lot of information packed into this video. The compiti, the homework, will be the esercizi on pagina 112. The exercise is on page 112 in the book. Again, a link to the exercise key is in the description of the video. And in the next lesson, we'll be talking about il passato prossimo con avere. So this is actually really exciting because after the next lesson, you'll be able to talk about things that happened in the past. So that's obviously a pretty common thing that you need to use. So tune in next time. I hope you found this video helpful. Again, I'm Dana Scheider. If you would like to be reminded when another video is released, please subscribe. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'm happy to answer them as soon as I can. And finally, if you are a native Italian speaker and would like to offer a correction to something I've said, please drop that in the comments as well, and I will call it out in the next video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.